The morning sun shone bright over New Geneva as millions of people filled the crystal streets. Today was the Festival of Unity, the most important day of the year for all humans on Earth. Children laughed and ran between the tall buildings while their parents watched with happy faces. The air smelled of fresh flowers and sweet food from the street vendors. President Dae-ho Kim stood on the high platform of the Unity Tower, looking down at the sea of people below. He was 53 years old with kind eyes and gray hair that showed his years of hard work for humanity. For 12 years he had led the United Earth Federation, and in that time, the world had changed in ways no one thought possible. There were no more wars, no more hunger, no more homeless people sleeping in cold streets. Every child went to school, every family had a home, and every person had work that made them feel useful. The oceans were clean again, the air was pure, and green forests covered the land where deserts once spread. Admiral Soonja Park stood in the crowd with her 25-year-old daughter Nari. Soonja commanded Earth's space fleet, though it was still small compared to what other worlds might have. She wore her blue uniform with pride, and her daughter stood beside her in the gray uniform of a junior officer. Nari had joined the fleet 2 years ago and already showed great skill as a pilot. "Look at all these happy faces," Nari said to her mother. "It's hard to believe the world was once so different." Soonja nodded. She remembered the old days when countries fought each other, and people suffered. Those dark times seemed like ancient history now. "Your president made this possible," she said. "He brought us together when we thought it could never happen." On the platform, Dae-ho began to speak. His voice carried across the crowd through speakers placed throughout the city. "My friends," he said, 12 years ago we were a broken people. We fought each other over pieces of land, over different ideas, over resources that we thought were running out. But we learned something important. We learned that we are stronger together than apart." The crowd cheered. Dae-ho waited for them to quiet down before continuing. "Today we have colonies on 3 worlds beyond Earth. Our ships explore the stars looking for new places where humans can live and grow. We have built something beautiful here, something worth protecting." Dr. Min-ho Lee watched from his laboratory window high above the city. He was Earth's best scientist when it came to studying alien life, though so far they had found none. The universe seemed empty of other thinking beings, which made humanity feel very alone among the stars. Min-ho had spent years looking at signals from space, hoping to find proof that other intelligent life existed somewhere out there. As Dae-ho continued his speech, something strange happened. The sky above the city began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot ground. People pointed up and gasped as large shapes appeared in the air above them. Ships, but not human ships. These were smooth and dark, with curves that looked nothing like the angular designs humans preferred. Soonja grabbed Nari's arm. "Those aren't ours," she whispered. Her hand moved to the communication device on her belt, ready to call for help if needed. The alien ships settled into a formation above the city. There were 12 of them, each one larger than Earth's biggest military vessel. They hung in the air without making any sound, casting shadows over the celebration below. Dae-ho stopped speaking and looked up at the ships. The crowd fell silent. Children moved closer to their parents. Even the street vendors stopped selling their food and stared at the sky. A new voice spoke, but not from the platform. It came from the alien ships themselves, broadcast somehow directly into everyone's minds. The voice was cold and harsh, like metal scraping against stone. "Humans of Earth," the voice said. "We are the Hegemony Coalition. We have watched your species for some time. You have reached a level of development that requires our attention." 3 beams of light shot down from the largest ship. When the light faded, 3 beings stood on the platform next to President Dae-ho. The crowd gasped and stepped back. The first creature looked like a large lizard that walked on 2 legs. Its skin was dark green and covered in scales. Its eyes were yellow and cold. The second looked like a giant insect with 6 arms and a head that moved in quick, jerky motions. The third was harder to describe. It seemed to change shape slightly as people looked at it, never quite staying the same. "I am Vextar," said the lizard creature. Its mouth didn't move, but somehow everyone heard its words clearly. We speak for the 12 species that rule this part of the galaxy. Your expansion into space has brought you to our attention. Deho stepped forward, showing no fear despite facing beings that could clearly destroy his city if they wished. Welcome to Earth, he said in his calm, steady voice. We are honored by your visit. I am Deho Kim, leader of the United Earth Federation. We have long hoped to meet other intelligent species. The insect creature, Quindal, made a sound like clicking metal. Your hopes are not important, it said. What matters is that you understand your place. This galaxy has been ruled by the hegemony for over 2,000 years. Every world that reaches space travel must join us or be removed. Removed? Deho asked, though his voice stayed calm. Destroyed, said the changing creature. Made into empty rock floating in space. We have done this to 17 worlds that refuse to accept hegemony rule. We show mercy to those who submit willingly. The crowd below began to murmur with worry. Parents pulled their children closer. Sunja felt Nari tense beside her and put a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder. Deho was quiet for a long moment, thinking carefully about his words. We appreciate your offer, he finally said, but humanity has just learned to govern itself peacefully. We are not ready to give up that freedom to join a larger government we don't understand. Vextar's yellow eyes narrowed. You misunderstand. This is not an offer. This is a command. You have 3 choices. Join willingly, join by force, or cease to exist. And if we choose to remain independent? Deho asked. To trade with you and be friendly neighbors but keep our own government? The 3 aliens looked at each other. Then Quindal made that clicking sound again, which Sunja realized was probably laughter. Independence is not possible, it said. Primitive species cannot be trusted to govern themselves properly. Look at your own history, centuries of war and destruction before you finally achieved basic order. That is exactly why we cannot give up our freedom, Deho replied. We learned from our mistakes. We grew stronger by facing our problems ourselves. Freedom is not something we can trade away, no matter what you offer in return. The changing creature moved closer to Deho. Your military is small. Your technology is basic. Your species has existed in space for less than 50 years. We have been among the stars for millennia. You cannot resist us. Down in the crowd, Sunja felt anger rising in her chest. These creatures spoke to humans like they were children who didn't understand the world. She had spent her life protecting Earth and its colonies. She knew exactly how strong humanity's defenses were, and while they might not be able to fight 12 alien species, they weren't as weak as these beings seemed to think. Deho smiled, and there was something in that smile that made the aliens pause. You may be right about our military, he said, but you're wrong about our spirit. Humans don't give up easily. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that would have destroyed weaker species. We didn't get this far by backing down when things looked impossible. Vextar stepped back onto the beam of light. You have 72 hours to consider our offer, it said. Accept membership in the Hegemony Coalition, or face the consequences of your pride. The 3 aliens vanished in the light beams, and their ships disappeared from the sky as suddenly as they had appeared. The crowd stood in stunned silence for several seconds. Then Deho spoke again, his voice carrying to every corner of the city. My friends, he said, we have just learned that we are not alone in the universe. We have also learned that freedom is not free, even among the stars, but we are the same people who built this beautiful world from the ashes of the old one. We are the same species that learned to live in peace after thousands of years of war. Whatever comes next, we will face it together. The crowd began to cheer, but it was different now. Before it had been the happy sound of celebration. Now it was the determined sound of people who knew hard times were coming but refused to be afraid. Sunja looked up at her daughter and saw her own determination reflected in Nari's young face. Whatever these hegemony aliens thought about human strength, they were about to learn something important about the species they had just threatened. They were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous opponents are those who look peaceful on the surface. 3 weeks had passed since the aliens visited Earth. Dr. Min-Ho Lee had barely slept during that time. He spent every hour in his laboratory, studying the energy readings his instruments had recorded when the hegemony ships appeared. What he found made him worried and confused at the same time. The alien ships were powerful, much more powerful than anything humans had built. Their weapons could destroy entire cities in seconds, but their defenses seemed old and slow, like they hadn't been updated in hundreds of years. It was as if the hegemony had stopped trying to improve their technology because no one had challenged them for so long. Min-Ho printed his reports and walked quickly through the halls of the government building. He needed to show President Daeho what he had discovered. Maybe this information could help Earth find a way to survive what was coming. In the presidential palace, preparations were being made for a state dinner. Leaders from Earth's colonies were visiting to discuss the alien threat. The dining hall was decorated with flowers and filled with tables covered in white cloth. It should have been a beautiful evening, but everyone knew they might be planning for war. Captain Jae-Sung Choi sat in the security control room, watching dozens of screens that showed every corner of the palace. He had been in charge of protecting the president for 5 years, and he took his job very seriously. Tonight, he was more careful than ever. The hegemony had said they would wait 72 hours for an answer, but Jae-Sung didn't trust them to keep their word. Daeho stood in his office looking out the window at the city below. His advisor, Yoon Seo-han, sat at the desk reading reports from military commanders around the world. She had been his closest friend for 20 years, since before he became president. They had worked together to build the peaceful world that now existed, and both of them knew they might have to watch it burn. "The people are scared," Yoon Seo said, looking up from her papers. "But they're not running away. Applications to join the military have increased by 300% in the last week." Daeho nodded. "That's what I expected. Humans have always been fighters when they need to be. The question is whether fighting will be enough." A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Min-Ho Lee entered, carrying a thick folder of papers. His clothes were wrinkled and his hair was messy from days of working without rest. "Mr. President," Min-Ho said, "I have information about the alien ships. You need to see this." He spread papers across the desk, showing energy readings and technical drawings. "Their weapons are incredibly advanced," he explained, "but their shields and armor use technology that's hundreds of years old. It's like they built these ships a long time ago and never bothered to upgrade them." "What does that mean for us?" Yoon Seo asked. "It means they might not be as unbeatable as they think," Min-Ho replied. "Our weapons are different from theirs. They might not know how to defend against them." Before anyone could respond, alarms began ringing throughout the building. Captain Jae-Sung's voice came over the speakers. "Security alert, unknown persons in the building, this is not a drill." Daeho grabbed Yoon Seo's hand. "The safe room," he said, but she shook her head. "The dinner," she replied. "There are children." In the dining hall, school groups were invited to meet the colonial leaders. They ran toward the dining hall, Min-Ho following behind them. As they rounded the corner, they heard the sound of energy weapons firing. Bright flashes of light came from the dining hall, followed by screams. Jae-Sung appeared in front of them, his face pale. "Sir, you can't go in there. We have hostile aliens in the dining hall. They're using some kind of cloaking technology. We can't see them clearly." "How many children?" Daeho asked. 43 kids, sir, ages 8 to 12. They're trapped in there with their teachers." Daeho started toward the dining hall, but Jae-Sung blocked his path. "Sir, it's suicide. They're trying to draw you out." "Then we can't disappoint them," Daeho said with a sad smile. He pushed past the captain and ran into the dining hall. The room was chaos. Tables were overturned, and scorch marks covered the walls where energy blasts had hit. Several adults lay motionless on the floor, but Daeho could see the children huddled behind an overturned table near the far wall. Their teachers were trying to protect them with their own bodies. Shimmering shapes moved through the room. The cloaked assassins. Daeho could barely see them, like looking at heat waves in the air. One of them turned toward him and raised what looked like a weapon. "Over here," Daeho shouted, drawing the assassin's attention away from the children. "I'm the one you want." The assassin fired. The energy blast hit Daeho in the chest and threw him backward. He felt his body burning, but he forced himself to stay conscious. The children were still in danger. More security guards rushed into the room, firing their weapons at the shimmering shapes. The aliens' cloaking devices flickered and failed as the guards' bullets found their targets. 3 assassins fell, their bodies becoming visible as they died. But the damage was done. Daeho lay on the floor, his breathing shallow. Yoon Seo knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. "Help is coming," she whispered. "The doctors are on their way." "The children," Daeho said weakly. "Are they safe?" "Yes," Yoon Seo replied. "You saved them. You saved them all." Daeho smiled and closed, his eyes for the last time. Captain Jae-sung stood over the alien bodies, his face filled with rage. These creatures had come to Earth as diplomats, then returned as murderers. They had killed children and teachers along with the president. The final count was 847 dead, including 31 children. A message began, broadcasting on every screen and speaker on Earth. It came from the hegemony ships which had returned to orbit around the planet. The voice was the same cold, harsh sound they had heard 3 weeks before. "Humans of Earth," the message said, "your leader is dead because he refused to accept the natural order. You have seen what happens to those who defy the hegemony. You now have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally, or your entire world will be sterilized. We will remove every trace of human life from this planet and give it to a more obedient species." The message repeated 3 times. Then the alien ships began showing images on screens across Earth. Dead worlds, empty and lifeless. Cities turned to glass by alien weapons. Entire civilizations erased from existence. These were worlds that chose to resist. The voice explained. "This is the fate that awaits all who challenge hegemony rule." In the palace, Yoon Seo stood up slowly. Her clothes were stained with Daeho's blood and her face was hard as stone. Captain Jae-sung approached her carefully. "Ma'am," he said, "the government is looking to you for leadership. What are your orders?" Yoon Seo looked around the destroyed dining hall. She saw the scorch marks on the walls where children had almost died. She saw the body of her best friend, the man who had brought peace to an entire world. She thought about the millions of people looking to her for guidance in the darkest hour humanity had ever faced. "Captain," she said in a voice that didn't sound like her own, "activate Protocol 7. Jae-sung's eyes widened. "Ma'am, are you certain? Protocol 7 is—" "I know what it is," Yoon Seo interrupted. "I helped write it even though Daeho never told me how far it went. Do it now." Jae-sung spoke into his communicator. "All stations, this is Control. Authorization Alpha 77. Protocol 7 is now active. Repeat, Protocol 7 is active." Across Earth and its colonies, hidden systems began activating. Secret messages went out to military commanders who had been waiting for this moment. Deep underground, machines that had been sleeping for years started to wake up. Admiral Soonja Park received her orders while standing on the bridge of her flagship. She read the message twice to make sure she understood correctly, then looked out at the small fleet of human ships visible through the viewport. What she was reading seemed impossible. "Ma'am?" asked her daughter Nari, who served as her communications officer. "What are the orders?" Soonja folded the message and put it in her pocket. When she looked at Nari, her eyes were filled with a cold fire that her daughter had never seen before. "Prepare for war," Soonja said, "and send a message to Colonel Hyun-woo Kang. Tell him it's time to show the galaxy what humans are really capable of." Around Earth's solar system, asteroids that had looked empty for decades began opening like flowers. Military bases that had been hidden for years revealed themselves. Ships that had been disguised as mining equipment shed their fake hulls and showed their true nature as warships. The hegemony had killed Earth's beloved leader and threatened to destroy every human in the galaxy. They thought they were facing a weak, primitive species with a small military and no real defenses. They were about to learn how wrong they were. In the depths of space, Colonel Hyun-woo Kang stood in the command center of a base that officially didn't exist. Around him, thousands of officers and soldiers prepared for a war the galaxy had never seen before. These were Earth's real defenders, the ones who had been waiting in secret for the day when humanity's peaceful facade would need to fall away. "Sir," said one of his officers, "all hidden fleets report ready. The enemy has no idea what's coming." Kang nodded. The president always said that the price of peace was being ready for war. He's gone now, but his wisdom lives on. Send the signal to all units. Colonel Hyunwoo Kang walked through corridors that most humans didn't know existed. Deep beneath the surface of Titan, Saturn's largest moon, lay a military base larger than most cities. For 15 years, thousands of people had worked here, in complete secrecy, building weapons and ships that the galaxy had never imagined. "Status report," Kang said to his aide, Major Bo-Ram Shin, as they entered the main command center. "All hidden fleets are responding to the activation signal," Bo-Ram replied, reading from her tablet. "Fleet Command reports 3,214 ships ready for combat. Ground forces report 800,000 troops at full readiness." Kang nodded, but his face remained grim. The numbers sounded impressive, but they were about to face 12 alien species that had ruled the galaxy for 2,000 years. What about the special projects? Project Deep Strike is online. The reality manipulation drives are functioning perfectly. Project Ghostwalker reports all stealth systems operational, and engineer So Young Yu says the planetary defense grid is ready to activate. On Earth, So Young Yu stood in a control room hidden beneath what looked like a peaceful communications facility. Around her, technicians worked at stations that controlled systems spread across the entire solar system. For years, people had thought Earth's satellites were just for talking to the colonies and watching the weather. They were wrong. "Orbital, Platform 7, report status," So Young spoke into her headset. "Platform 7 ready," came the reply. "All weapons systems show green. We have a clear firing solution on the enemy fleet." Platform 7 was what people called a communications satellite. In reality, it was a weapons platform armed with gravitational lances that could crush a ship from the inside out. There were 47 such platforms hidden among Earth's civilian satellites. "Begin the transformation," So Young ordered. "It's time to drop the mask." Across Earth's orbital space, satellites began changing. Panels slid away to reveal weapon barrels. Communication dishes folded back to show missile launchers. What had looked like peaceful technology was revealed as the most advanced defense network any planet had ever built. On the other side of the solar system, Lieutenant Nari Park stood on the bridge of a ship that didn't officially exist. The Silent Thunder was Earth's most advanced stealth destroyer, completely invisible to any known scanning technology. Nari had been chosen to command it because of her skill as a pilot and her ability to think quickly under pressure. "Take us closer to the enemy fleet," she ordered her crew. "I want to see exactly what we're dealing with." The Silent Thunder moved silently through space toward the Hegemony fleet. 800 alien warships hung in formation at the edge of Earth's solar system, waiting for humanity's surrender. They were arranged in neat rows, like they were on parade instead of preparing for battle. "They're not even trying to hide," said Lieutenant Tae-Jin Woo, the ship's tactical officer. "Look at that formation. They have no scouts, no defensive screen, nothing. They think this is going to be easy." Nari studied the enemy ships through her periscope. The aliens had made them large and intimidating, covered in spikes and strange symbols. But size wasn't everything in space combat. Sometimes the smallest ship could destroy the largest one if it hit the right spot. "Send a full scan to Admiral Park," Nari ordered. "I want her to see what we're seeing." Admiral Soonja Park received her daughter's report while standing in the command center of Earth's real flagship, the Righteous Fury. The ship was 10 times larger than anything the public had ever seen, armed with weapons that could tear holes in space itself. "The enemy is positioned exactly as our simulations predicted," she told her staff. "They're expecting a weak opponent who will either surrender or put up a brief, hopeless fight. They have no idea what's coming." Captain Dongmin Cho, commander of the Stealth Attack Squadron, appeared on the main screen. His ships were already in position around the enemy fleet, invisible and waiting for orders. "Admiral," Dongmin reported, My pilots are ready. We can destroy their entire command structure before they even know we're here. Not yet, Sunja replied. We're going to give them one chance to leave peacefully. President Kim would have wanted that. Dr. Min-Ho Lee was no longer in his laboratory studying alien technology. Instead, he stood in a military briefing room explaining his discoveries to a room full of generals and admirals. What he had learned about the hegemony was about to change everything. Their greatest weakness is their arrogance, Min-Ho said, pointing to a diagram on the screen. They've been the strongest force in the galaxy for so long that they've stopped innovating. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons, but our kinetic projectiles can punch right through them. What about their psychic warfare capabilities? Asked General Hee-Jin No, commander of Earth's ground forces. That's where we have our biggest advantage, Min-Ho replied with a smile. Human brain patterns are naturally resistant to psychic manipulation. It's something about the way our neurons are organized. They can't control us the way they control other species. In the hegemony fleet, Commander Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, confident that the primitive humans would surrender within hours. His species had conquered 17 worlds using the same tactics: show overwhelming force, kill the leaders, threaten total destruction. It had never failed. Any response from the humans? He asked his communications officer. Nothing, sir. They appear to be paralyzed with fear. Vextar's mouth stretched into what his species considered a smile. Excellent. Begin broadcasting the final ultimatum. Tell them they have 1 hour to surrender, or we begin the sterilization process. The message went out across all human communication channels, but instead of the terrified surrender Vextar expected, something else happened. A new voice responded, calm and strong. Hegemony Fleet, this is Admiral Sunja Park of the Terran Defense Force. You have murdered our leader and threatened our children. You have one chance to leave our space peacefully. Refuse and face the consequences. Vextar laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through his ship's bridge. Terran Defense Force? We detected less than 200 ships in your entire fleet. Do they think they can threaten us? Sir, said his sensor officer, I'm detecting some kind of energy buildup from the human ships. Probably charging their weapons for a suicide attack, Vextar replied. Prepare to destroy them quickly. I want this over with minimal damage to the planet. We'll need it for colonization, but the energy the sensors detected wasn't coming from weapons. It was coming from engines. Engines on ships that were appearing from nowhere. First one, then 10, then hundreds of human ships began materializing around the hegemony fleet. They had been there all along, hidden by stealth technology that made them completely invisible. Mining ships shed false hulls to reveal themselves as destroyers. Cargo vessels dropped their disguises and showed their true nature as battlecruisers. Impossible, whispered Vextar. Where did they all come from? His sensor officer was frantically working at his station. Sir, I'm counting over 3,000 ships. They were hiding somehow. Our sensors showed nothing. The human fleet finished its deployment, completely surrounding the hegemony forces. What had looked like a small, weak navy was revealed as the most advanced military force the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Sunja Park's voice came over the communication channels again. You see, Commander Vextar, humans learned long ago that the best way to keep peace is to be ready for war. While you were ruling the galaxy through fear, we were preparing for the day someone would threaten our children. The largest human ship moved closer to Vextar's flagship. It was a massive vessel, bristling with weapons the hegemony commander didn't recognize. Strange energy fields surrounded it, bending light and space in impossible ways. Your technology is old, Sunja continued. Your tactics are predictable. Your arrogance has made you weak. But most importantly, you made one fatal mistake. What mistake? Vextar demanded, though his voice now shook with uncertainty. You thought kindness meant weakness, Sunja replied. You thought peaceful people couldn't be warriors. You were wrong. Across the human fleet, weapon systems came online. Not the simple energy weapons or missile launchers the hegemony expected, but devices that manipulated reality itself. Gravitational weapons that could crush ships from the inside. Temporal disruptors that could slow enemy fire to a crawl. dimensional torpedoes that could phase through any shield. "This is your last warning," Sunja said. "Leave now, and tell the galaxy that Earth is not as defenseless as it appears. Stay, and learn why humans have survived every disaster our violent planet could throw at us." Vextar looked at his tactical display. His 800 ships were outnumbered 4-1 by an enemy that had appeared from nowhere. Worse, his sensors were telling him things that seemed impossible. Some of the human ships were partially existing in other dimensions. Others were surrounded by fields that bent space and time. "How?" he whispered. "How did a primitive species develop technology like this?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Engineer So Young-Yu's voice reached the hegemony fleet from Earth's orbital platforms. "While you were busy ruling through fear," she said, "we were busy learning." The first shots of the war came from ships that couldn't be seen. Captain Dongmin Cho led the stealth squadron in their opening attack. His 12 invisible destroyers had positioned themselves inside the hegemony formation, so close to enemy ships that their crews could have seen each other through the viewports if humans had been visible. "All ships, fire on my mark," Dongmin whispered into his communicator. Even though space was silent, old habits made everyone speak quietly when hunting. The stealth ships opened fire at the same moment. Quantum torpedoes phased through the alien shields like they weren't even there, then became solid again inside enemy ship hulls. The explosions came from within, tearing the vessels apart from the inside out. 12 of the largest hegemony ships simply vanished in bright flashes of light. No warning, no defense, just sudden death from an enemy they couldn't see or fight. "What just happened?" Commander Vextar screamed at his crew. Where did those explosions come from? His sensor officer was shaking as he checked his instruments. "I don't know, sir. There's nothing there. No ships, no weapons fire, nothing." But the invisible ships weren't done. They moved through the hegemony, fleet like ghosts, striking again and again. Each attack destroyed another massive warship. The aliens fired wildly in all directions, trying to hit enemies they couldn't detect, but their energy blasts passed harmlessly through empty space. "Admiral Park," Dongmin reported over the communication channel, "enemy command structure is in chaos. They can't coordinate a defense against attacks they can't see." "Excellent work, Captain," Sunja replied from the bridge of the Righteous Fury. "All fleet units, begin Phase 2. Show them what real space combat looks like." The main, human fleet opened fire, and the galaxy witnessed weapons technology beyond anything the hegemony had imagined. Gravitational lances reached out across space, creating crushing forces inside enemy ships. The alien hulls crumpled like paper as artificial gravity fields compressed them into tiny balls of metal. Temporal disruptors fired next, surrounding hegemony ships with fields that slowed time to a crawl. From the human perspective, the alien vessels hung motionless in space, while human ships maneuvered around them at normal speed, picking them apart with careful precision. The most devastating weapons were the reality bombs. These devices created small tears in the fabric of space itself, causing enemy ships to simply stop existing. Not destroyed, not exploded, just erased from reality as if they had never been built. Commander Vexitar watched his fleet disappear around him. In the first 5 minutes of battle, he had lost over 200 ships. His remaining vessels were firing desperately at the human fleet, but their energy weapons seemed to have no effect. "Why aren't our shots hitting them?" he demanded. "Sir," his weapons officer replied, "their ships appear to be partially existing in other dimensions. Our weapons can't lock onto targets that aren't completely in our reality." "That's impossible. No species has developed dimensional warfare." "The humans have, sir." Lieutenant Nari Park watched the battle from the bridge of the Silent Thunder. Her stealth destroyer was still invisible, moving through the chaos of the Mao battlefield like a shark among minnows. Her orders were to gather intelligence, but what she was seeing was so one-sided, it barely qualified as a battle. "Captain," said Lieutenant Taejin Wu, "I'm detecting panic communications from the hegemony fleet. They're trying to call for reinforcements. Block all their transmissions," Nari ordered. "Nothing gets out of this system. I want their home fleets to wonder what happened here." The Silent Thunder's communication jamming systems activated, cutting off the hegemony's desperate calls for help. The alien fleet was now completely alone, facing an enemy they had never imagined could exist. On the planet Earth, engineer So Young-Yu coordinated the orbital defense platforms. The fake satellites had revealed their true nature as the most advanced weapons array ever built. Gravitational cannons fired precise shots that could destroy enemy ships from millions of miles away. "Target the large carrier vessels," So Young ordered her gunners. "Don't let them launch any fighters." The orbital platforms fired in perfect coordination. Beams of twisted gravity reached across space and crushed the hegemony's carrier ships before they could deploy their smaller vessels. The aliens had been counting on swarms of fighters to overwhelm human defenses, but those fighters never made it out of their launch bays. In the hidden command center beneath Titan, Colonel Hyun-Woo Kang monitored the battle through feeds from hundreds of sources. The engagement was proceeding exactly as human war planners had predicted for years. "Sir," reported Major Bo-Ram Shin, "we're receiving surrender requests from 3 of the alien species. The insectoid Quindal faction and 2 others want to defect from the hegemony. Deny the requests." Kang replied coldly. They had their chance to choose peace when President Kim offered it. Now they can face the consequences of following Vextar's orders. The battle continued for 3 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The hegemony fleet, which had seemed so overwhelming when it arrived, was being systematically destroyed by weapons and tactics they couldn't understand or counter. Captain Tae-Young Shin commanded the massive dreadnought Wrathful Justice, one of humanity's most powerful warships. His vessel mounted experimental weapons that could manipulate the fundamental forces of physics. When he fired the quantum cascade cannons, entire sections of the enemy fleet simply ceased to exist. "This is almost too easy," Shin reported to Admiral Park. "Their shields can't stop our weapons, their sensors can't track our ships, and their tactics are centuries out of date." "Remember," Soonja replied, "they've never faced an opponent who could challenge them. They've grown soft from ruling through fear instead of earning victory through skill." As the battle raged in space, another part of the human military was carrying out a different mission. General Hai-Jin No led ground forces in liberating the planets the hegemony had shown in their threatening broadcasts. These worlds had been destroyed as examples to frighten other species, but human intelligence had discovered something the aliens hadn't mentioned. Some of the populations had survived in underground shelters. "Landing successful on Kepler 442b, General No reported from her command ship. "We found the survivors. 60,000 individuals from 3 different species, hiding in deep caves for the past 50 years. The rescued aliens told stories that made human soldiers angry enough to fight even harder. The hegemony hadn't just destroyed their cities, they had hunted the survivors for sport, forcing entire populations to live like animals in hiding. These people thought they were the last of their kind," No continued. "They can't believe anyone was strong enough to challenge the hegemony." Dr. Min-Ho Lee had joined the Liberation mission as a translator and cultural specialist. He was working with the rescued populations, learning about hegemony tactics and weaknesses. "Admiral," Min-Ho reported to Soonja Park, "I've made an important discovery. The hegemony species aren't united at all. They're held together by fear of the ruling council. If we can break their command structure, the entire coalition will collapse." "Good work, Doctor. All fleet commanders, new priority target, the hegemony command ships. Find Vexistar and remove him from the equation." The human fleet began focusing their fire on the largest alien vessels. These were the ships that coordinated the enemy fleet's movements and communications. Without them, the hegemony forces would be reduced to individual ships fighting alone. Lieutenant Nari Park spotted the enemy flagship trying to escape from the battle. The massive vessel was running for the edge of the solar system, hoping to reach hyperspace before the humans could stop it. "This is Silent Thunder," Nari reported. "I have eyes on the enemy command ship requesting permission to engage." "Permission granted," her mother replied. "Make sure Vextar understands the price of threatening our children." The Silent Thunder moved into attack position. Even though the ship was invisible, Nari knew this would be dangerous. The enemy flagship was huge and heavily armed. One lucky shot could destroy her small destroyer. But Nari had spent years training for this moment. She positioned her ship directly above the alien vessel, where its weapons couldn't reach, and fired a full spread of quantum torpedoes. The torpedoes phased through the flagship's shields and armor, then materialized inside the ship's reactor core. The explosion was visible from Earth as the massive vessel disappeared in a ball of nuclear fire. Enemy flagship destroyed, Nari reported. Commander Vextar is gone. With their leader dead and their communications cut off, the remaining hegemony, ships began to panic. Some tried to surrender, others attempted to flee, and a few continued fighting with desperate fury. But the battle was already over. In less than 4 hours, the human fleet had destroyed or captured 750 enemy ships. Only 50 alien vessels managed to escape the system, and those were too damaged to pose any threat. Admiral Sunja Park stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking out at the debris field that had once been the mighty hegemony fleet. Around her, her officers worked quietly, coordinating rescue operations for alien survivors and salvage teams for destroyed ships. Casualties? She asked her aide. Minimal, Admiral. We lost 3 ships and 47 crew members. 6 months after the Great Battle, Fleet Commander Ji-Hun Lim stood on the bridge of his flagship as it entered orbit around the 12th and final hegemony world. Below him spread a planet, covered in crystal cities that had once housed the ruling council of the galaxy's greatest empire. Now those same cities flew human flags alongside the banners of their own liberated people. Sir, reported his communications officer, the Quindal Empress requests permission to formally surrender her species to Terran authority. Tell her I'll be down in an hour, Ji-Hun replied. And remind her that we're not here to rule anyone. We're here to make sure no one rules others without their consent. The war that had begun with President Dae-ho Kim's assassination had lasted only 4 months, but it had completely changed the galaxy. 12 species that had controlled space for 2,000 years now bowed to a human government that had existed for less than 50 years. It hadn't been a war of conquest. It had been a war of liberation. After the destruction of Vextar's fleet, the human military had moved quickly through hegemony space. Every world they reached told the same story. Populations of billions enslaved by their own governments, forced to serve alien masters who had conquered them generations ago. On Earth, President Yoon Seo-han sat in the same office where her friend Dae-ho had worked for 12 years. The desk was the same, the view was the same, but the world outside was completely different. Where once Earth had been a small, peaceful planet with a few colonies, it now found itself ruling a galactic federation of hundreds of worlds. The Terran Galactic Federation, she said to herself, reading the constitution that had been written in the months since the war ended. Dae-ho, I hope you'd be proud of what we've built from the ashes of your murder. Dr. Soo-Jin Kim entered the office carrying reports from across the galaxy. She had been appointed as Earth's Minister of Education, responsible for teaching human values to species that had forgotten what freedom meant. How are the schools progressing? Yoon Seo asked. Better than we hoped, Soo-Jin replied with a smile. The younger generations are adapting quickly to the idea that they can choose their own leaders. It's the older ones who have trouble understanding that they don't need to fear their government anymore. On the former hegemony worlds, human teachers worked alongside local educators to establish schools based on the principles Dae-ho Kim had believed in. Every child, regardless of species, learned about democracy, individual rights, and the importance of protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The transformation hadn't been easy. Some hegemony species had fought desperately to maintain their power, forcing human forces to engage in ground combat across dozens of worlds. But the outcome was never in doubt. The technology gap between human and hegemony forces was so vast that even massive numerical advantages couldn't overcome it. Admiral Sunja Park now held the title of Supreme Commander of Galactic Forces, a position she had never wanted but accepted, because someone needed to ensure the new order remained peaceful. She stood in the command center of Starbase Unity, a massive space station built at the center of the galaxy to coordinate the new government. Status report from all sectors, she requested. All quiet, Admiral, reported Captain Nari Park, who now served as her mother's chief of staff. Pirate activity is down 90%. Trade routes are secure, and we haven't had a single distress call go unanswered in 3 weeks. Soonjan nodded with satisfaction. The galaxy was finally becoming the peaceful place Daeho had always dreamed. It could be, but the most important changes were happening on the worlds that had been most brutally oppressed under hegemony rule. General Hyejin No led the humanitarian mission that was helping former slave populations rebuild their societies. "You should see Rigel 7, she reported to President Han during their weekly conference call. 6 months ago, the population was living in underground caves, afraid to come out during daylight because hegemony patrols would shoot them for sport. Now they have cities on the surface again, and children who have never seen sunlight are playing in parks." Similar stories came from across the galaxy. Species that had been driven to near extinction were flourishing again. Worlds that had been strip-mined to feed hegemony war machines were being restored to their natural beauty. Technologies that had been suppressed to keep populations weak were being shared freely. The economic transformation was just as dramatic. Under hegemony rule, most planets had been forced to send all their resources to the ruling worlds, leaving local populations poor and desperate. The Terran Federation had abolished those tribute systems immediately, allowing each world to keep what it produced and trade freely with others. Engineer So Young-Yu had been appointed as head of the Galactic Infrastructure Project. Her job was to help former hegemony worlds rebuild their technology and industries without the restrictions their former masters had imposed. "We're giving them everything," she explained to a meeting of Federation officials. "Manufacturing techniques, energy technology, medical advances, everything we've developed over the past 50 years. The goal isn't to make them dependent on us, but to help them become strong enough to defend themselves." The Federation Constitution reflected these values. Unlike the hegemony, which had ruled through force and fear, the Terran system was built on voluntary membership and mutual cooperation. Any world could leave the Federation if it chose, though so far none had wanted to. Dr. Min-Ho Lee had become the Federation's chief xenobiologist, working to preserve and restore species that the hegemony had driven to near extinction. His most important discovery came from studying the liberated populations. "The psychological damage is extensive," he reported to President Han. "Some species have been enslaved for so many generations that they've forgotten how to make decisions for themselves. It's going to take years, maybe decades, to undo what the hegemony did to them. But progress was being made every day. Former slaves were learning to vote, to speak freely, to dream of futures they could choose for themselves. Human counselors worked with local leaders to help entire populations remember what it meant to be free. The military transformation was perhaps the most visible change. The vast fleets that had once enforced hegemony rule were being converted into rescue ships, exploration vessels, and defensive platforms. Instead of weapons designed to conquer and destroy, the galaxy now saw ships built to explore and protect. Colonel Hyunwoo Kang, now promoted to general, oversaw the conversion of former hegemony military bases into humanitarian centers and scientific research facilities. The weapons factories that had once built tools of oppression now produced medical equipment and terraforming technology. "It's incredible," he told Admiral Park during one of their inspections. Some of these facilities were capable of building planet-killer weapons. Now they're manufacturing water purification systems and food synthesizers for refugee populations. 5 years after President Daeho Kim's death, the memorial service was held not just on Earth, but on hundreds of worlds. Across the galaxy, representatives from every species in the Federation gathered to honor the man whose murder had inadvertently freed them all. Admiral Nari Park, now commanding her own fleet, spoke at the main ceremony on Earth. She stood before billions of beings, both human and alien, who had gathered to remember the president who had brought peace to one world and, through his death, to an entire galaxy. "President Kim never lived to see what we accomplished," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of known space. "He never saw the liberated worlds, the rescued populations, or the free societies we've built together. But I think he would be proud, not of our weapons or our victories, but of what we chose to do with our power. She paused, looking out at the sea of different faces representing dozens of species that had learned to live together in peace. They killed one good man and awakened a sleeping giant. But we didn't just wake up and destroy our enemies. We woke up and chose to build something better. We proved that strength doesn't have to mean cruelty, that power doesn't have to mean oppression, and that the strong can choose to protect the weak instead of exploiting them. In the audience, elderly, beings from species that had been enslaved for centuries wept tears of gratitude. Young humans who had never known war listened with wonder to stories of the old galaxy, where fear ruled instead of hope. President Yoon Seo-han spoke the closing words of the ceremony, her voice carrying the same gentle strength that had made her friend such a beloved leader. Dae-ho Kim believed that peace was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. Today, as we look out at a galaxy where every child can sleep safely and every adult can speak freely, we see his dream, made real. He gave his life to protect our children, and in return, we gave freedom to the galaxy's children. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence that was observed on every world in the Federation. Across hundreds of star systems, billions of beings stopped what they were doing to remember the man whose death had changed everything. But the real memorial to President Kim wasn't the ceremonies or the statues. It was the galaxy itself. A place where former enemies worked together, where the strong protected the weak, and where no child needed to fear the darkness because humanity stood guard against the night.